Hey, Ray, I want to make sure we talk to you about this. We lost an Eagles great early on Christmas morning, the legendary Bill Bergey. You covered his entire 7-year Eagles career, 1974 to 1980. What do you remember most about number 66?
I remember all aspects of him. I remember him as a player, and I remember him as the guy I got to know off the field. And they were equally impressive. Bill was a great player, a truly great player. I mean, he was. I mean, in my view, he was Dick Butkus. I mean, he was the same kind of player, a big man for his position. Bill played at 245, which is a big man for a linebacker, and yet he had tremendous agility, and a lot of lateral speed. I mean, Bill was, everybody thinks of him as being the ultimate stuffer of the running game and the guy that could blow it up at the line of scrimmage, and he sure could. But he also, I mean, he played the whole field. I mean, he could play sideline to sideline. And you look at his I think he had like 26 career interceptions. I mean, he could do everything you wanted a linebacker to do. And as soon as he came to Philadelphia, I mean, he changed the defense. He was a high draft pick of the Bengals and was a really good player in Cincinnati. And the Bengals really just didn't want to pay him what he was worth. The Bengals have always been a pretty cheap organization. So he was coming to the end of his rookie contract and he wanted more money. And his agent was sort of threatening that he was going to take Bill to the World Football League at that time. And Bill's brother Bruce had already signed with the World Football League. So Paul Brown thought that Bill was going to lose him for nothing, that he was going to jump to the World League. So he was willing to trade him. And the Eagles jumped in and got him, and they paid a stiff price for him. They got 2 number 1 picks plus several other picks. I mean, it was a big package, but they felt like, they had Roman Gabriel then, Carmichael then, they had a good offense, but they needed a defense, and they needed a guy to be the focal point of that defense. And Bergey at that point was clearly the guy. And so they made this big deal and paid a stiff price, and they brought him in, and he was great from day one. I mean, he really was. My most vivid memory of Bill was his first home game as an Eagle, first regular season home game as an Eagle. The Eagles were playing the Cowboys at the Vet on a Monday night. And it was Bill's first home game, in regular season home game in front of the Philadelphia fans. And of course, it's a Monday night game against the Cowboys. You know what the energy is like in the building. You know what that feels like. And Bill was just super psyched to play that game because he knew that Paul Brown and all the Cincinnati people were going to be watching on Monday Night Football. So Bill, who was a very emotional guy anyway, was super, super emotional. And it was, the Cowboys and the Eagles weren't really a fair match back then. The Cowboys were really into their whole America's game thing, and they were really good. They had Staubach and all those guys. And the Eagles weren't very good. But Bergey got out there, and Bergey just played like he was on fire that night. I mean, he must have had 20 tackles. I mean, he was all over the field. And it was very close in the fourth quarter. And in the fourth quarter, the Cowboys have the ball like the 1 yard line, and they're getting ready to punch in the touchdown that's going to seal the game. And they hand off to a kid named Doug Dennison, who was a young running back from Kutztown. And when you first see him take the ball, there's this hole that opens up. It looks like he's going to walk into the end zone. And he gets into the hole, and all of a sudden, here comes 66. I mean, like a tractor trailer coming down 95. And he hits Dennison in the hole. The ball pops loose, takes a couple of hops into the hands of Joe Big Bird Lavender, the cornerback, who takes it 96 yards down the sideline for a touchdown. And the Eagles wind up winning the game. And talk about an introduction to Philadelphia. I mean, all the people were waiting to see what this Bergey guy was all about. And they sure saw that night. And I thought the greatest quote that came out of it was after the game, Tom Landry said, "I thought there were 11 of him out there," talking about Bergey. And that was kind of the way it looked. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, that's one game. But he pretty much played his entire career in Philadelphia just like that. He was a great player. I mean, he's in the Eagles Hall of Fame. and in my view, he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think he was in that strata of great middle linebackers. He was definitely one of them.
Ray, it's funny you mentioned about the Cowboys. Some years ago, I was at a fundraiser event where it was a long weekend type of deal with Tony Dorsett. Spent the afternoon hanging out with a bunch of guys, Tony Dorsett being one of them, at a poolside with a few beverages floating around and so forth. Tony Dorsett told me Bill Bergey was not only the toughest football player he ever played against, he was the best football player he ever played against. High praise.
High praise indeed, and well earned. Bill was all of that. I think the sad part is that when he first came to the Eagles over that period of 74, 5, 6, 7, the Eagles were not very good. I mean, their defense was just not very good. I mean, he was playing with a lot of guys who just weren't very good, and he was just great. I mean, he was all over the field, and he was playing. I mean, he was the defense for 5 years. Then 78, right when Vermeil has now finally built this team that has a chance to actually do something. And he's drafted Carl Hairston and Dennis Harrison, and you're starting to get some guys on that team, Jerry Robinson. You're starting to get some guys on that team that can actually play, and you're starting to put a defense kind of around Bill. Was when he blew out his knee.
Yeah.
And he came back from it, but when he came back at that point, he was older. And now he was his knee never really fully bounced back. And so right when that team was ready to take off, Bill wasn't the same player. So in the years when he was at his prime, the team just wasn't good enough, and he was kind of overshadowed. Most Sundays he was playing 1 on 11. And then right at the point where they finally had a team and he could have really taken over, he gets injured, and he played it out. He played those last several years and always gave it his best. But even he admitted at the end, I just wasn't the same player anymore. And I wish he would have had an opportunity to be the younger Bill Bergey playing on that team on the way to a Super Bowl. That would have really been something to see. Bill's last game was Super Bowl 15.
Yeah,
that was it. Super Bowl 15 was it. He wanted to make that one run at a championship. He had never been in a Super Bowl, obviously. And that was what he always wanted. I mean, he had this great career, Pro Bowls every year, all kinds of honors. But his dream was, everybody's dream was to win a Super Bowl. He got there the last year, and they lose to Oakland. And when it was over, Bill sort of acknowledged, I think this is it for me. And a month later, they had the announcement that he was retiring, and he walked away. But I mean, talk about the great linebackers in the history of this franchise. I mean, it's Bednarik, and will always be Bednarik. But if you ask me who the next best one was, I'll tell you it was Bill Bergey.